Hello and welcome to another episode of Snake's Territory. I'm Jesse Friedman, and today I am very excited to be joined by my good friend Patrick Lyons, who does an outstanding job covering the Colorado Rockies over at Rockies Insider. And Patrick is an all-around great guy who knows basically everything there is to know about baseball and the history of baseball. So Patrick, welcome on the show. We are really happy to have you today.
Thanks. I've enjoyed your stuff on Twitter from afar and the handful of DMs we've exchanged over the years.
Patrick and Patrick may or may not have stayed at my house in the past, and I've stayed at his house. And yes, we've gotten to be great friends over the years.
A
And
couple home and
always,
home series. We got to trade. Three
yeah,
games on the road, 3 games at home. It works out great.
there you go. Well, as I said, Patrick covers primarily the Colorado Rockies, but he is also, of course, very well versed in the NL West. And we are going to start there, talking about this extraordinary NL West division. The Diamondbacks, as we speak here, entering this weekend series against the Rockies, are 23-21, which is a perfectly fine record. There's really nothing terribly wrong with being 23-21 at this point in the season. Unless you're in the NOS, Patrick, when the Giants are 25-19, the Padres are 27-15, and as of the time of this recording, the Dodgers are sitting atop the division at 28-15. Here is a visual for those of you joining us on YouTube of how the NL West looks currently. The Diamondbacks are 5.5 games out of first place in the division right now. And Patrick, certainly the NL West being one of the best divisions in baseball, that's not really a new thing. We've gotten pretty used to that over the years. But I'm curious what kind of stands out to you the most about the NL West here after this first quarter or so of the season.
I think the obvious answer would be just how good the Giants have been, but in a way, it's how great the Padres have been. Where
Yeah.
you can argue they are the best team right now in Major League Baseball, and doing it with similar serious injuries to their better players like the Dodgers, and yet the Padres are continue to be there. The Diamondbacks are as good as they should have been last year, and yeah, as talented as everyone thought they were going to be going into 2025. So they've just been, so incredibly well-rounded, and it doesn't seem like there's going to be any give. And, all three of the wildcard teams look very easily like they are going to come out of the NL West. And it's not because they get to play the Colorado Rockies 19 times a year. Now it's down to 13. So that would be 6 more wins they would have had under the old schedule. But now it's a little bit more balanced, and they're only going to have only quote unquote 7 more victories, more likely than not, against the Rockies than every other team in the National League.
We will talk about the Rockies a little bit more later in the show, of course, preview this weekend series, and also have a larger conversation about are the 2025 Rockies the worst baseball team ever? That feels like an outrageous claim, but maybe it's not as outrageous as I would have thought a few weeks ago. But yeah, sticking with the teams near the top of the NL West, I am with you that I think the Padres being where they are right now is as surprising to me as anything about the NL West up to this point in the season. This was a team, Patrick, that I looked at after the offseason they had and just didn't see a whole lot of depth. They lost Jurickson Profar, they lost Kyle Higashioka and David Peralta, and some very important bullpen weapon in Tanner Scott, who of course was a big contributor for them. There are other players on that list as well, and yes, they did bring in Nick Pivetta, but outside of him, there were not a whole lot of meaningful offseason additions, and it looked like a top-heavy roster, and I think it is kind of a top-heavy roster still. But they've managed to get enough from guys like Tyler Wade and Gavin Sheets and Rockies legend Elias Diaz, who has stepped in and been a reasonably good catching option for them. Somehow it's worked out pretty well, as I said earlier, 27-15 so far.
Yeah, it's somewhat of a stars and scrubs approach, but the scrubs, quote unquote, that they've brought in, they've been more of those veteran types, like Martin Maldonado. You go, yeah, that's one of the best backup catchers you could have. Despite his age, catchers can age really well. When they have that veteran type status. Jose Iglesias fitting in really well when guys are down. Ha-Seong Kim's another guy that they lost last offseason.
Yeah.
So everybody's been plugged in and playing pretty well. Jake Cronenworth only just recently got back from the IL. Jackson Merrill missed some time. So for the most part, they've really picked their spots, and the big bats have lifted them in a major way. Randy Vasquez has been certainly competent. He looked pretty solid against the Rockies at Coors Field during the 21-0 loss or defeat that they handed the Rockies on Saturday. You had Stephen Kolek in only his second career start pitching a shutout. Was it 3-hit shutout? Maybe 2 hits? It all blurs together. We'll talk about the Rockies in a little bit. Sorry, I have PTSD when it comes to coverage of that team. But they've gotten those kind of contributions, and you look and you say, okay, Mike Schilt is that guy to push the right buttons. He did it in St. Louis for a while, and it seemed like Bob Melvin was going to be that one, and it just didn't work for whatever reason. It's working for him now in San Francisco, but now Mike Schilt is running that ship, and things are going really well. And what a lot of us thought was going to be the last run with so many of their guys free agents, and maybe they would have to trade at the deadline, Luis Ariz, Dylan Cease. And now, they might be able to hold on to all those guys, maybe extend some, or maybe AJ Preller can just get creative and have an old school baseball trade. Luis Ariz for you name it, starting pitcher on another team, and it can be somewhat of a win-win. So the Padres, not only just being great, but extending their window of contention a little bit further.
How skeptical are you of the Padres? I mean, they've clearly been good so far. Their run differential backs it up. It's not like they're just winning one-run games and getting blown out. They have blown out some teams as well, as the Rockies are well familiar. But yes, how skeptical are you that they can actually play at this pace for a long period of time?
I am a little bit skeptical. I think because they're so top heavy. On last Friday at Coors Field, they were up. Gosh, it might have been 13-2 at one point, and the Rockies were able to get to the Padres bullpen to the extent where Robert Suarez had to warm up and be used to come in for one batter to finish off that game. Now, again, it's a 13-8 victory for the Padres, but it kind of gave you some insight that okay, their bullpen can be gotten, especially with Tanner Scott not there. But Tanner Scott was also one of those trade deadline acquisitions last year, and maybe they can go out and find that player again without trading Ethan Salas or Leo DeVries, two of their top prospects that they still have in the minors. They always find another prospect. They always find another guy that
Yes.
they can get. In fact, there could be an all-star that's out there on another team right now that goes to the Padres for a player that's still in college right now or still in high school that will get drafted by the Padres and immediately flip. Like that's just kind of how AJ Preller is riding. And you know what? That kind of aggressive nature from your GM is certainly going to extend that window of contention and fill in the gaps for wherever you may have flaws.
It's interesting how, as we're saying, that the roster certainly feels top heavy, but you look at some of the numbers that these guys have put up. I mean, Elias Diaz has a 109 WRC plus, like he's been an above average hitter for them. Tyler Wade, a 106 WRC plus. Gavin Sheets has been very good at 129, and it's created this situation where the Padres to date have actually been fairly well rounded in a way that I think I'm fairly skeptical of in the long run. Like you mentioned, Randy Vasquez, how he's pitched pretty well this season for the Padres, but then you look at the peripheral numbers, and they're not so good. And of course, health is also going to be a major factor for this team. I know they've had some injuries already. Jackson Merrill recently returned from one, but really any injury to one of those star level players on this team is potentially devastating for them. So it'll be interesting to see if they're able to keep this up. I guess as far as the Dodgers are concerned, Patrick, are between the Dodgers and the Padres. I feel like it's still a pretty obvious. Like I would totally take the Dodgers in the long run. But yeah, I mean, you think the Padres make this interesting, or is this pretty clear cut for you?
I think the Padres could make it interesting. The Dodgers are not concerned about making the postseason. The
Yeah.
Padres, I don't know if they really are, concerned as well, but they have to be at least a little bit, right? So the Dodgers are thinking about the postseason and getting those horses in their starting rotation ready in their arms. And so they can rest guys. So for a lot of teams, someone like a Roki Sasaki, who, would be their a number 2, number 3 starter in anyone's rotation, he's just another guy. And so him being on the IL is just great. That means he's more likely than not going to be that much healthier later on in the season when the games really count. So it's sort of for that reason that the Dodgers, I don't want to say could take their eye off the ball, but could get past in the regular season and not win the NL West. But if you're, as long as you're the top wild card seed, you'll still have that home field advantage in the first round. And, I don't think it really matters all that much. So the Padres will make it interesting. That certainly will be fun. But the Dodgers just, they really do have, bigger fish to fry when it comes to the postseason.
The Diamondbacks, of course, as well as the Giants, are certainly in the mix here. We should not be completely dismissing either of those teams. I think I'm a little skeptical I'm skeptical of the Giants. I think at large they've started to cool off a little bit. The Diamondbacks, of course, just took 2 out of 3 there, and the Diamondbacks are, they're in this thing, Patrick. 5.5 games in the middle of May, like you can certainly make that up. But I'm curious, as kind of the outsider looking in here. Do you think the Diamondbacks have a chance to actually compete in the division, or is this more of a wild card play for them in your mind?
I think it is more of a wild card play, but it's still potential. Again, because the Dodgers, they'll get to 100 wins, but we had it a couple of years ago in 2021 where Dodgers got to 106, but Giants got to 107, and you
Yeah.
say, maybe the Dodgers should have won 110. Well, they didn't, and so they'll win 100 games pretty easily this year. But if another team can catch fire, like the Diamondbacks, who I had going to the postseason this year, I actually had one team from the East, one from the Central, and one from the West going. But knowing full well how good the West would be, I just thought all the teams would beat up on each other. And most of them haven't beaten up on the Rockies just yet. So you keep that in mind and you say, oh wow, okay, they are going to continue to play at the top of the National League. So I think the Diamondbacks still have all those pieces. You talk about it every day. Eduardo Rodriguez, he's got to be, you have to think he's going to pitch better. Zach Gallen still really hasn't pitched entirely like Zach Gallen. Corbin Burns has, been there and has really, started to deliver after somewhat of a slow start. So, all the pieces are finally coming together, and you can look back at 2024 and you go, okay, that's that World Series hangover. Like that was a long year for everybody in that organization, and they came back in February, charged and ready to go, but yet they didn't realize that maybe the gas tank started out at 85%. It felt like it was full. They were excited. They were ready to get on the road. But then, again, 85% into the season, you kind of run out of gas and you go, oh, we were missing something. And that's not the case right now in 2025. They're a little bit hungrier. And with the Padres, being that number 2 team or team 1B next to the Dodgers, it's like, oh, man, we're really getting overlooked again here. And so I think that plays to the Diamondbacks' favor. And, I like I said, I had them going to the postseason as the only wild card coming out of the NL West behind the Dodgers. So I enjoy watching them, and I think they're going to be all right going forward. They got a shot. They do.
It feels like number of games played against the Rockies is actually like a meaningful variable in how I evaluate all of these NOS teams. And we'll talk more about that here in a moment about the Rockies, of course, moving on from Bud Black, making a big decision there, and being off to truly one of the worst starts that I could even imagine for a baseball team up to the middle of May. So that's on the other side of this break. But first, a few words from the guys over at Foul Territory.
Sometimes we get the asks for lightweight hoodies, and I'm like, they exist. They're awesome at Rowback.
Without a doubt. Comfort, lightweight, durability. I wear these all the time. The color schemes are absolutely phenomenal.
Go check it out. You can use the code FOUL on rowback.com for 20% off your first purchase. That's FOUL on RHOBACK.com. 20% off all shorts, hoodies, polos, and more. Go check out Rowback.
So Patrick, I'm going to try to set the stage here as best I can. People joining us on YouTube can see the numbers on the screen. The Rockies are 7-36 entering this weekend series with the Diamondbacks. They have a minus 137 run differential already through 43 games. They're basically averaging to lose each game by more than 3 runs at this point in the season. Their win percentage is 163, if you can believe that. And I think the most interesting fact here for me, Patrick, is that a year ago today, the Chicago White Sox were 14-30. And of course, that is the White Sox team that went on to set the modern era record for losses across Major League Baseball with 121 a season ago. And that White Sox team was, 6.5 games better than where the Rockies are currently. This is astonishing, Patrick. I mean, they're on pace to win 26 games. I know it's early, and we're saying that a lot for really every team at this point in the season. You know, it's just a quarter of the season that we've played so far. But this is really remarkable what has happened so far in Colorado.
Yeah, the numbers are staggering. It's hard to keep track. The strange thing is, because they are at such an extreme of playing poorly and so few wins, is that each time that they lose, it doesn't change the percentage that much. Like, they won a game and it went from like, 137 loss projection to, now it's only 133. So one of the wilder ones is that on the road, I think after getting swept in Texas, so they're now 2-20 on the road. So they're on pace for about 7 wins. I think it actually is 6, but they're on pace for about 7 wins on the road, and the fewest in franchise history before that for a team that we know doesn't play as well down at sea level, and they're not at altitude. The pitches look different. The movement is just different. It's much more aggressive and extreme. That's why a lot of Rockies hitters don't hit as well on the road. It's not that they hit so much better at Coors. It's that on the road, it's just so much harder than what they're used to seeing. The worst record in franchise history going into 2025 was 14 wins. And that was during the pandemic season of 2020 when they played 30 on the road. So now they're playing 81 and they're projected to have only about 7 wins. They've already had 3 8-game losing streaks, something that they had never done before in a season. And they did that before they were 25% of the way through the year. They had, they kind of got shorthanded there with Ezekiel Tovar going on the IL, which, has been cause for some concern. And, certainly if he had never gone on the IL and Bretton Doyle didn't need to go on the bereavement list, maybe we're looking at 11 wins, but that's still bad. Right now at 7-36, it is the worst 43 game start in the modern era. Not even the Baltimore Orioles of 1988 that started out 0-21. They were still able to be better than that. And you look at the Chicago White Sox, who are still a laughingstock in the game, and they've got twice as many wins as the Rockies right now. So things are really hard. And if that's not all bad enough, the light at the end of the tunnel is not the first overall draft pick. It's not even a chance at one of the top 3 draft picks in the draft lottery. No, because they've selected within the top 6 the last 2 years. The Rockies, whether they lose 120 and don't tie the record with the White Sox from last year, or they tie it at 121, or they lose one more at 122, they are still going to pick no higher than 10th in next year's draft.
It's unbelievable. I guess the big national news here is that the Rockies did make the decision to move on from Bud Black as the manager. Black was with the Rockies for a long time. I believe as long as Torey Lovullo. 2017 was his first season in Colorado. So it just totally had slipped my mind how long Bud Black had been there.
And I think Torey got hired like a week or so before, like in that 2016-17 off season. So technically Torey was, tenured a little bit longer, but you're right. That was the same off season.
So now it is Warren Schaefer previously the third base coach, who's stepping in as the interim manager. Clint Hurdle is now stepping in as the interim bench coach, which is certainly a name that Rockies fans would be very familiar with. Diamondbacks fans, I'm sure, as well. But I guess the obvious question here, Patrick, is what led the Rockies to make this decision? I mean, I think a lot of people would argue there was plenty of reason to do this a long time ago. I mean, oftentimes managers are just sort of let go when a team is just unable to perform for an extended period of time. And the Rockies have not been above 500 since 2018, and of course have lost over 100 games each of the past 2 seasons. So why did it take this long, I guess, to get to this point?
Yeah, your phrasing of the question is interesting because I don't think they really made the decision so much as they were forced into it. Back in 2023 when the rails really started to fall off, and it was, over a year after Trevor Story and John Gray left, and it felt like the clubhouse just needed a change, like it was just really stale. And the players were still going to be the players that they had in 2023, as it was in 24 and as it will continue to be in 2025. But sometimes just a change in voice can bring about slightly different results. That hasn't happened yet for Warren Schaefer, still 0-3 as the manager. But 2023 was really when they could have made that move. This awful start that they've had, coupled with a 21-0 loss, the worst in their franchise history. Only 2 other times in the modern era has a team won 22-0 against a guy in only his second ever start. This was also about 24 hours after the GM Bill Schmidt said, "Yeah, no, but he's our manager. We're going to stick with that with him." And like, it just got so bad that they sort of were forced to do something. They were forced to change something because it really began to appear by everybody on the outside looking in that they were a complacent organization, and I think they still are. And that's a harsh word to say because there's a lot of people within the organization and players who they're not complacent individually. But
Sure.
if they are not held with a certain standard and the expectations ultimately don't become, terribly high, then you don't have to maybe reach as far. And you don't know that. It's all part of your subconscious, right? But if you are, in meetings, every day about something and you're kind of getting nitpicked, which certainly would suck, but when you're a professional, that's what you get paid to do. You're going to step up. You're going to find a way to figure out how to get certain things done and how to get more out of what you have. And the Rockies really haven't cared to do that very much, unfortunately. So I think people on the outside of Denver, I think those who were here like myself, we were able to recognize that this is kind of how things were going when, even back in 2021, they decided, well, we'll keep our general manager, but we'll trade our franchise cornerstone in Nolan Arenado. And then the GM ends up quitting or was let go, depending on your definition of things. And so you go, all right, the guy that really wanted to win and took the front office to task for not doing enough to win, you got rid of him and made him look like he was the malcontent when he was the one pointing out there are issues here. There's not enough being done to support the staff, to support the roster. And you got rid of that guy, and there was nobody else that really, had the chutzpah or, just the seniority to step up and say, hey, this isn't right. This isn't good. And you go back and look at all the players that they signed and they acquired. One of the common phrases that was used every time was, they like playing here, as
Mm.
if many, many more players, and this is true, didn't really want to come to Colorado because they want to go and win. They want to win a championship. They want to be relevant. They want to go to a team that can maybe make them better and help their skills and improve either in the high minors or at the major league level. And the Rockies have not been able to do that for a very long time. So if someone is willing to come to Colorado and get paid a certain dollar amount, then that's a guy that we want to acquire. And that's obviously, rather backwards in
Mm.
this industry. So I think they were just forced more than anything than really seeing, hey, you know what? We can probably do better. They could have been doing better for the last 3 years and chose not to up until this past week.
The worst run differential in the modern era by any team, minus 349 by the 1932 Boston Red Sox. And the Rockies are currently on pace for minus 516. Just just to add some more perspective, it really is wild. And I guess thinking about this 3-game series this weekend, Patrick, if you're a Diamondbacks fan, you're kind of like, oh, well, you better sweep the series, right? I mean, like the Rockies have a 163 win percentage. If they get 1 out of 3 against you, like, you shouldn't feel so good about yourself. So the pitching matchups, you can see them here. We do not know officially yet who's starting Friday for the Rockies against Corbin Burns. Saturday is German Marquez against Zach Gallen. And then Sunday, kind of a fun pitching matchup. I know he hasn't had a ton of success yet, but Chase Dollander will start for the Rockies, opposed by Merrill Kelly. And I did want to ask you about Dollander real quick, because he's 23 years old. He was the Rockies' first-round draft pick, I believe, just 2 years ago. It's kind of remarkable that he's managed to progress this quickly. Granted, the Rockies don't have a whole lot of better options, so maybe maybe that's part of the reason that he got here. But he was pretty good his last time out against the Texas Rangers. He gave up 1 hit in 6 innings, only 2 runs. And even German Marquez, Patrick, he's got an ERA over 8 for the season, but he was also pretty good his last time out. So maybe the Diamondbacks, certainly, talking of complacency. Speaking of complacency, the Diamondbacks certainly will not want to do that going into this series.
Yeah, the Padres took their eye off the ball on Sunday, so the Rockies were able to eke out a victory. And it was somewhat of a statement game, not in the definitive sense when you think of like it's an important game, but it was important to the Rockies. It was important to German Marquez to, in a sense, defend his manager and Bud Black after the 21-0 loss, and he went out and he shoved. It was his best start since 2023 when he needed Tommy John surgery. So that was critical. Chase Dollander, as you mentioned, 1 hit through 6 innings. That came in the 6th inning. So he had himself a no-hit bid for a guy that, yes, some of the fact that Austin Gomber not being ready for the season, still on the 60-day IL, created a spot in the rotation. But all throughout spring training, Bud Black would say, and the entire staff, that Dollander just needs to get more experience against experienced players. And you and everybody who listens to Snakes Territory knows full well that the Pacific Coast League is a punishment more than it is an opportunity, right? So, hey, if you're going to get knocked around, at least have it at the major league level with major league level coaches. And so a lot of that is why, Dollander is up. The offense, not good. They had a streak of 32 consecutive innings of not scoring a run on the road. They got shut out in 3 straight games in San Diego earlier this year in April. And, Friday's starter is probably, all indications are pointing to Carson Palmquist actually making his major league debut. He was supposed to start on Thursday night in Albuquerque, but got scratched. And according to sources, it'll probably be the lefty who was drafted back in 2021 out of the University of Miami. Looks a lot like Kyle Freeland, not facially, but when you see his windup, he's a little more 3/4 angle than Freeland, but he'll dip down low and can be a little bit funky. Again, sub 4 ERA. I think around 3.5 is his ERA in the Pacific Coast League. He's given up 3 home runs in 7 starts. Only 1 came in his last 6 starts. So he's kind of, in peak form right now. So I expect him to go out and, do the best he can against a team that's, looking to probably break out a little bit more. I don't know if Corbin Carroll wants to break out anymore. Is 13 home runs? Is that legit? That's crazy.
I think it's 14 home runs, if I'm remembering correctly. Yeah, Corbin Carroll.
Wow.
I don't have it in front of me right now. Maybe it's changed by the time this show goes live anyway. But yeah, Corbin was tied with Aaron Judge and Kyle Schwarber for the major league lead in home runs as of a couple days ago. So it's been just utterly remarkable to watch that. But yeah, it should be interesting to see what happens this weekend. Major league debut, maybe for Carson Palmquist, as you said, on Friday, and then another youngster on Sunday. Those guys have decent stuff. I mean, certainly guys that you wouldn't want to take for granted if you're the Diamondbacks. And even German Marquez, like the numbers this year have been really, really bad. But as I said earlier, he was good his last time out, and certainly on the whole has been not a great pitcher, but a decent pitcher, a guy who we've certainly seen shut down the Diamondbacks from time to time over his long tenure in Colorado. Last season, the Diamondbacks took 9 out of 13 games against the Rockies, which was certainly decent. The Rockies did take 2 out of 3 against them at Coors Field, though, in September, and that wound up proving pretty significant down the stretch, as the Diamondbacks, of course, not able to make the playoffs and would have if they had won one more game. So certainly be looking to avoid an outcome like that this time around.
That's the last series the Rockies have won. It should be noted as well.
Really?
That had previously been the last time the Rockies had won 2 games in a row.
Wow.
It was I don't know if it was during that series or if it was just, one of the 2 wins was piggybacked on another. And I think it was 2 in a row against the Diamondbacks, and they've won 2 in a row once this year.
That's crazy. Well, yeah.
Another crazy stat, yes.
The Diamondbacks in their nightmares, they see the Colorado Rockies, I guess. So we'll see if they're able to overcome that this weekend. Before we say goodbye on this show, did want to give a quick shout out to Evan Longoria, who is officially retiring from Major League Baseball. Hasn't officially happened yet. I believe the plan is for him to sign a one-day ceremonial contract with the Tampa Bay Rays. I guess maybe I can't say Tampa Bay anymore. The Tampa Bay Rays in June, and then he will retire at that point. Of course, if you're a Diamondbacks fan, this is relevant. Longoria certainly not going to be known as a Diamondback by most people, but he did spend his last Major League season in Arizona, and he made a couple of incredible defensive plays for the Diamondbacks during that incredible 2023 run all the way to the World Series. And I think people forget on the whole, Patrick, just how good Evan Longoria was. I know it was a little bit front-loaded, where he was really good when he first came up, faded a little bit toward the latter years of his career, but it's a guy who, over on Baseball Reference, is close to 60 WAR. I don't know if he's necessarily going to make it to the Hall of Fame. I would guess maybe not, but he certainly has a case.
He does, yeah. He was a part of 6 postseason teams and a part of, the phrase that gets thrown around for a lot of guys, and certainly that was true of Larry Walker and Todd Helton, is when you tell the history, when you tell the story of baseball, do you need this player to be a part of it? And you could argue yes. And when you talk about the Rays and the first Rays playoff team, getting in there and then going to the World Series and bringing about this change, Evan Longoria was a part of that. So that 6 other postseason seasons that he was a part of, crazy to think that his final game, his final at bat did come during that World Series. Has a career 342 home runs, over 1,000 RBI, which is pretty good. And a really good metric created by Jay Jaffe of Fangraphs is JAWS. And according to JAWS, which is Jaffe's win share system, Evan Longoria is the 20th best third baseman of all time. Now, that doesn't get you in, but that does give you an idea of oh, wow, he was really good. Because I think for so many players, they obviously get worse as time goes by. They're not bad, but they're just not as good. And that's all you remember them by. It's like I've heard some people say oh, I don't know if Arenado is going to get in the Hall of Fame now. And I'm like, he already was a lock 4 years ago. That was already a done deal. Now it might just be, he might not be a first ballot Hall of Famer, but even still, when you go back and look, when it's all said and done, and you take the peak of a player's career, and if they're able to compile a little bit, which Longoria was able to do somewhat, I think Arenado might be able to do that even better. You go, okay, I think Arenado, will have that strong case. Longoria will definitely get some votes, no doubt about it, but I think he'll end up falling short. Might even be able to make multiple ballots, though. If you get 5%, even that is certainly prestigious. So that'll be interesting, to see. As the 20th best third baseman of all time, that's pretty damn good.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's worth noting that I'm sure just about every Diamondbacks fan out there has probably watched Snakes Alive, the documentary that they made about the team's run to the World Series in 2023. And I think it's worth bringing up that Evan Longoria was sort of they had him make an appearance just at the very end of the series, and it was like, oh my gosh, they got Evan Longoria to come in and do some interviews, and I think that just kind of illustrates what he meant to this fan base, that he was very much a leader in the clubhouse, of course, given the number of years of experience that he has in the majors. Even though he wasn't putting up unbelievable numbers on the field, he was a really, really important part of that clubhouse, and I think someone that a lot of Diamondbacks fans really, really appreciated, even though he certainly was not the star level player that he was early in his career. So certainly shout out Evan Longoria. Believe he still lives in Arizona. He has for a long time. Maybe people will see him around town. Who knows? But yeah, any final thoughts on Longo as he retires?
No, it was cool being a part of that coverage and getting to know him ever so slightly. Super nice guy. Yeah, great model citizen, as you said, kind of being a leader in that clubhouse for a young team who didn't have very many guys that they could look up to and say, hey, what was that like? Or I think there was even a story that he told once about, like, yeah, the guys want me to bring in the World Series ring and show it around, and that was a motivator, or that was a reminder that, like, yeah, I got a American League championship ring, but you don't want to see that. If you want a ring, you want to see the World Series championship ring, not, hey, we lost the World Series, so we get the AL ring. So that's just so invaluable. Not just a guy on the bench, right? Not a role player that has that experience, but a guy who was a dude back then. So yeah, he was a valuable piece during that 2023 magical run for the Snakes.
Well, we really appreciate all of you being with us here today. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to our channel here on YouTube at Snakes Territory. You can also drop a like on the video, leave a comment, let us know what your favorite memory of Evan Longoria was as a member of the Arizona Diamondbacks. Patrick does an outstanding job covering the increasingly interesting Colorado Rockies. There comes a point when you're just so bad that everyone's like, oh my gosh, like, wait, what is happening in Colorado? Nobody knows that team better than the one and only Patrick Lyons. So be sure to follow him over on Twitter at Patrick D. Lyons. Patrick, you're on YouTube. Is it at Rockies Insider? Am I getting that right?
That's right. At Rockies Insider. I've got a newsletter too over on Substack, which is Patrick D. Lyons, but writing about the Rockies and some fun stuff and learning about who Lafayette Napoleon Cross is and how he relates to the 2025 Rockies. He was the player manager of the Cleveland Spiders, who lost over 130 games. So he's an interesting dude, and I write about stuff like that and other things in the Rockies Insider newsletter.
So be sure to find Patrick's content at all of those different places. You can find me over on Twitter at Jesse and Friedman, and our show is at Snakes Territory. Thanks again to all of you for being with us. We really appreciate it, and we'll be back with another episode of Snakes Territory very, very soon.